Welcome to the REHolistic Physio podcast. Here we are going to try and find out the whys in order to work on the hows. Everything that is covered on the podcast is evidence on. Sorry, I've mucked up already. I told you I would, didn't I? Everything that is covered on the podcast is based on current evidence and up-to-date information on each topic. Please seek advice from your GP or a healthcare professional before carrying out any of the advice that you hear on the podcast. So today I'm very pleased to welcome Dr. Alioto, is that right? Yes. Good. I've been working on it. Dr. Rachel Alioto is a board certified licensed naturopathic medical doctor in the state of California in the USA. We welcome another lady from America to come and talk on here. It's so exciting. So I have to clarify to all of our listeners that it's about 8:15 over here. What is it over there?
About 12:15 p.m.
12:15. Yeah, I'm living in darkness. You're in the light. It's lovely. You earned your 4-year doctorate degree in naturopathic medicine at the National University of Health Sciences in Illinois. You've completed training in the benefits of nutrition to heal chronic illnesses, as well as extensive training in gastrointestinal health and the nervous system. Your specialities include gastrointestinal health, mood and anxiety disorders, autoimmune and chronic diseases, pediatrics, and hormone imbalances. Medicine and caring for others has always intrigued you. However, throughout high school and college, you struggled with severe stomach aches and weight loss that led to all the tests and no medical doctor could figure it out. Through your setbacks, you're inspired to find a more individualized and wholesome way of healing. Love it. That's amazing. This experience led you to naturopathic medicine, which soon became your passion, which is great. You grew up in Northern Carolina with your parents and older sister. You like maintaining your personal health and wellness, and it's extremely important to you. And you stay consistent with a rigorous strength and conditioning program, which I love to hear. So the thyroid, brilliant topic. Really pleased to have you on to talk about it. So thanks for coming on. Such a huge, very complicated topic that we have chosen to talk about tonight. But we're going to try and sort of break it down a little bit. It's really just for listeners to sort of understand a little bit about why the thyroid is important and maybe what happens with the thyroid, because I think a lot of people know hypothyroidism and then hyperthyroidism, but maybe don't know all the bits in between, which is the sort of stuff that when I listen to your masterclass, I kind of, there's a lot more to this than I originally thought. So I think for us that don't know so much about it, I think they're going to learn a lot. I think people are going to learn a lot. So I just wanted to touch on sort of the symptoms that you went through. So most people would sort of know about anything from the weight gain, weight loss, sort of pain, fatigue, muscle fatigue, but there's a lot more to it. So like the brain fog as well was really interesting, because obviously we talk a lot about hormonal changes in the podcast as well. But the brain fog, you normally go, oh yeah, menopause, perimenopause, brain fog. Oh, that's normal. That's normal. But also the constipation was a big one for me. Never even would have thought put the two together, really, thyroid and constipation. The list goes on, doesn't it, really? Which I think we'll probably touch on later. But do you want to sort of tell me a bit more about what you tend to see when people come into clinic? Are there other things that you go, this is a sign as well,
Yeah, and you already said the main ones. We know of the fatigue, the weight gain, the hair loss, right? But we don't think about, as you said, the brain associations, the gut associations. So a lot of times I do see constipation, I see depression, I can see morning headaches, I see digestive complaints. Another one that might be a little bit more noticeable for patients is dry, itchy skin, in addition to dry, brittle hair.
Wow.
And loss of outer eyebrows, feeling cold all the time, and swelling, particularly in the face.
Okay. And the eyebrows thing's interesting, because I'm going to just put it out there, I was starting to lose the outer edge of my eyebrows myself. And it was a beauty therapist said to me, it was probably where you're laying on the pillow. And I think if people were more aware that could actually be a sign, because I thought, oh yeah, that's fair dues. It must be something to do with laying on my pillow when I'm on my side.
Yeah.
Is that to do with the growth? The hair, is that all to do with like when you lose the hair and the thinning? Is it the same sort of thing with the eyebrows then?
Exactly. Yes.
Okay.
And on its own, a loss of the outer eyebrow is not necessarily going to be associated just with thyroid,
Yeah,
but if we have
yeah,
a whole slew of these symptoms,
yeah,
now we're starting to put the puzzle pieces together.
yeah. Yeah, so it's putting it all together, isn't it? We've always said it's all the systems in the body really are really vastly interconnected. So you can't always dissociate certain parts of the body that are causing things. You have to put the sort of the plethora of things together, don't you, to sort of come to the end conclusion. And that's what's the holistic approach to it, really, isn't it? So also, I know in this, I found this really interesting that you said issues can be acute and subacute, which means sort of the shorter term and sometimes the longer term, isn't it? The more chronic side of things. But they don't always have to be long lasting. You don't always have to have an issue.
Right. Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
because sometimes symptoms come up and then they go, but when they start to linger is when we start to think about it, right? So in
yeah,
terms of the acute symptoms, yeah, we might have a little fatigue for a little while, but then it starts to be more signs
yeah,
and symptoms that kind
yeah,
of pile on.
yeah. So if we go into sort of like a bit about the thyroid then itself, because I'm sure like people like even myself, even though I'm a physio by background, and we do anatomy, a lot of anatomy and things like that, but and systems, different systems in the body. But thyroid is not one I don't believe we touch on particularly in training. I mean, I trained a fair amount of years ago, so it may well have changed now, but I didn't essentially learn about the thyroid. It's only through learning more about generally putting the whole body together and piecing it together and finding out that all these things are really vastly interconnected that I've sort of researched more. But thyroid is essentially the gland that is in the neck, and responsible for regulating all metabolism through the body, which is basically your chemical processes for fueling the body, isn't it? So I found it's got a phenomenal sort of key. Oh gosh, I mean, it's amazing, isn't it, thyroid? And you'll tell us a bit more about this. It has a huge relation to the pituitary gland, which, if people don't know, that's in the brain, um, which that also releases hormones. And the
Yes.
thyroid and the pituitary gland basically work together, don't they?
Yes.
So they work together. One says help me, and the other one says okay, I'll
Yeah.
help you out. Could you tell us a bit more about that? Because I'm not the best person to talk about, but the secretion of the T4 and the conversion into the T3 and the TSH. If you can tell us what that is, that'd be great.
Absolutely. So the pituitary, yes, is a gland in the brain that secretes all kinds of hormones. And the anterior part of the pituitary is particularly associated with the thyroid. It's also interestingly associated with the adrenal and the gonads, which create reproductive hormones. So sometimes when one of those is off, they're all a little bit off, but we'll get there. So basically, the pituitary says, thyroid, I need hormone. So it sends out thyroid stimulating hormone to then allow the thyroid to release your T4. That's a thyroid hormone that that then will translate or convert into T3. So now we have TSH, T4, and T3. T3 is the active form of the thyroid hormone. So if we're only checking TSH and maybe T4, we're not getting the full picture of the thyroid function. So that T3 is what is converted into and then makes the thyroid hormone active.
Yep,
Yeah.
great. Thank you for that. So when people have tests and things, we were touching on that earlier, weren't we? Like lab tests.
Mhm.
Obviously, we were clarifying, weren't we? Because America might be slightly different to the UK. I think on asking questions to a GP friend of mine, I don't think it's that different in terms of the first initial lab test you have. So if people go to the GP over here, they normally have hormone balance level check, and then their I said this earlier and now I've forgotten, T3 and T4 levels checked. Is that right? Have I said
Yeah.
that right?
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, you're right. And usually, at least in the US, and it might be the same over there, is that generally just TSH, maybe T4 is checked. And that's it. We do that,
Mm,
once a year or
mm,
less. And so when we get more comprehensive and complete in our thyroid panel, because I want to know exactly what the thyroid's doing, I'm adding in free T3 as well as the 2 antibodies. Now, the antibodies, that is assessing for autoimmunity. And
yeah.
while we can test it with every panel, we don't always need to test it if we kind of know autoimmunity is not part of the picture.
Yeah. So can you just clarify for me, because I don't actually think I established this myself. If you think there's a problem and you've put it autoimmune problems and then versus sort of thyroid, what how so you do tests to see if it was an autoimmune. So if you didn't find out it was a thyroid problem, you check and see if it was an autoimmune problem, or would there be something that flags up on your thyroid checks?
Yeah, it's kind of hard to determine because while we have thyroid and then we have immune, they do overlap. So the interesting thing is that thyroid hormones can be totally normal. We can have totally
Yeah.
normal thyroid function, and yet we have an elevation in thyroid antibodies. Therefore, we have a thyroid autoimmune picture. Now, there is overlap in symptom picture, but not necessarily that the thyroid is under functioning if we have an autoimmune picture. Does that make
Okay.
sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So for me, I'm always checking all of it because I
Yeah.
don't want to cut corners.
Yeah.
But there is a point that sometimes they're all imbalanced. Sometimes it's just the thyroid hormone. Sometimes it's just the autoimmune or antibodies.
Okay.
All the same symptoms.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And with it was really interesting when you said something about the poor thyroid function can be caused by so many different things. Like it can be chronic infection, liver and gut health, poor hormone balance, blood sugar issues. Are we including diabetes? Is this in the blood sugar issues, diabetes, or is it not so
That
much of?
would be,
Yeah.
yes. It's a little bit in its own entity as diabetes, but it is a blood sugar dysfunction.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. And so when you sort of want to get to the bottom of why, obviously you as a professional would want to get to the bottom of why. So, and it's trying to reestablish a balance, obviously, then in the body, isn't it? And all the systems working together essentially again to help the thyroid function, again. So you went through sort of 6 patterns that you sort of note on the thyroid dysfunction, if you like. So the first one was the primary hypothyroidism, which you said that's the only one that would respond to thyroid hormone medication. Is that
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
That's interesting because over here, I think I wasn't going to mention medications because I don't know if they're the same, but we do have like levothyroxine is one of
Yes.
them that you use as well, but I don't know about the rest, whether it's the same. But that would be the only one. And is that because of the TSH?
Yes. Primary hypothyroidism is the only pattern of the 6 that responds to the medication because it is the only one that at its core needs thyroid hormone because the thyroid is not functioning. So if the thyroid isn't making enough hormone because it in itself is under functioning or not functioning, then it's going to respond to giving more hormone. But the other, 5 patterns, which we'll get into, it's not a cause of the thyroid not making hormone. There's other root causes, and
Yeah.
that's why there's differentiation.
Okay. And with that, just to clarify, potentially you don't have to be on that medication forever. Like there's people on it for years and years and years, but they don't essentially need to always be on it for years, do they?
If we can address the root cause of the imbalance in thyroid hormone, then no, we don't need medication for the rest of our lives. But for those who don't want to improve their thyroid function and don't really care to be on medication, that they are on medication, then it would be a value because, if you need it, let's take it. But if we can fix the problem in itself, then we don't need it any longer. So
Yeah.
there is potentiality for people to improve their thyroid function and not need to rely on medication.
Yeah. That's brilliant, isn't
I've
it?
seen it.
And number 2 was hypothyroidism due to the pituitary hypofunction. So the pituitary gland not doing its job, essentially. So the causes of this, what might that be?
Yeah, oftentimes when the pituitary is not functioning well enough, we could so call it fatigued. The
Yeah,
pituitary can become fatigued as well. And then it fails to send out the signals to the thyroid to make hormone. And so
yeah.
if the thyroid isn't getting the signals, well, it's not going to release hormone. And usually this is due to chronic stress, but it
Mm,
can also be due to poor diet, poor sleep, too much caffeine or carbohydrate intake,
mm,
chronic inflammation, postpartum associations, etc.
yeah,
Yeah. And so then, it's like we can give thyroid hormone for a while, but what we really need to do is address the pituitary.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And then number 3 was underconversion of the thyroid hormone. So it was T4 not converting well, isn't it, to T3?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
And this is
Uh,
probably the most common presentation that I see.
yeah. And was that wasn't linked to the oral contraception, was it? It's number 4, I think, was the
Number
yeah, the
five.
overconversion. Oh, was it? Oh, ah,
That's all right. We're close because both 4
we're
and
close.
5, the overconversion and the thyroid binding globulin, those are both associated with reproductive hormones.
Ah, that was it. That's why. So if I was to ask you then about, because this has come up a lot actually, about fertility issues linked with thyroid issues. So
Mhm.
I think, like I say, I don't think it's always got to the bottom of, and like I think you touched on sometimes it's just people aren't maybe expert enough in these fields, or they just maybe don't know as much information as you guys do. Um, about what to look for. So you have someone with fertility issue and maybe something going on with the thyroid. Obviously, the link between the pituitary gland, the gonads, and
Mhm.
then the thyroid's huge. So would you be looking at trying to somehow regulate?
Absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
because yes, there's the association with the pituitary gland, which is a huge component when it relates to
Oh,
fertility.
I can imagine.
But there's also a relationship between too much estrogen
Yeah.
or too much testosterone or too much cortisol, which is our stress hormone. And if
Yeah, that's the
any of
other one.
those are off, after a while, the thyroid can be impacted as well. And so we have to figure out where within that cascade of hormones things are imbalanced so that we can allow the body to function at its optimal self.
It's just a minefield, isn't it? It's huge.
It,
This is huge.
it
I
is.
think we
And
just talked for
yet,
days.
it's like we can also get all of this information by a couple lab tests,
Yeah.
and then just understanding the associations. But it's
Mm.
not hard to figure out as long as we have the data.
Yeah. Yeah. No, you're right. Got to get the data.
Right.
Um, so, so then we put the am I number 4, the overconversion, which is the elevated levels of testosterone. Is
Yes,
this right?
exactly. Yes,
Oh, I've learned
exactly.
something. Wonderful.
Yeah, yeah.
So you'd be looking for increased testosterone in someone's hormone levels, would you?
Right, exactly. And particularly, we see this more in females in relation to thyroid hormone,
Yeah.
not so much in males or those with testicles. And it's really the relationship of how testosterone and blood sugar then affects the hormones and how they are
Yeah.
converting.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And then number 5 is thyroid binding globulin elevation, which that was the one that we said was linked to the oral contraception and estrogen
yes,
synthetics, sort of, medication that's maybe someone's been on for a while. I guess that's quite a lot of women these days are on
yes,
contraceptive pills, aren't they,
mhm,
for a long, long period of time.
yes.
So I'm guessing there's more and more people coming through with this sort of type of thyroid disorder. Would they be?
Yeah, yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And it presents primarily as excess or too much estrogen. But
Yeah.
then it's like the symptoms of low thyroid come about. And
Yeah.
so, yes, you know, it's hard to test. I mean, I don't usually test for the binding globulins.
Yeah.
It's just kind of, you know, okay, we need to address the excess estrogen and then support thyroid. And it kind of can balance itself out when we, again, treat the root cause.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So then number 6, I mean, this is just, oh my God, it's amazing. So thyroid resistance.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And
both
this is,
things are functioning well, is that right? So pituitary and thyroid are functioning okay, but just
yes,
somewhere in the mix, it's not, the right things aren't getting to the right cells.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because it's like we're making hormones, but the hormones aren't being brought into the cells to then be able to function.
Yeah.
So we have low thyroid symptoms, and it's
Yeah.
almost always related to cortisol or
Yeah.
stress.
Big one.
Yeah.
It's very big. I think that's a separate in itself, isn't it? It's a
Yeah,
separate sort of topic in itself. But
it
you
is.
said that there's quite a close, the brain and like the thyroid. I mean, everything in the brain and every system in the body, like we said before, is very interlinked. But you said about serotonin and dopamine can impact thyroid health. And as we know, then we link it back to the gut as well. Um, and how serotonin, quite a lot of, when I was speaking to Dr. Ace about the gut, and how
Mhm.
serotonin and dopamine, quite a large amount of that is actually essentially established in the gut, isn't it?
Yes.
So, and I used to think before I had the meeting with Dr. Ace, I thought serotonin and dopamine. I just immediately was like, oh, brain,
Right.
dopamine, substantia nigra, basal ganglia,
Right.
like that's just me thinking, as a clinician, not knowing much about everything. Um, so yeah, it's amazing, and how chronic stress can have such a huge impact. How it's just stress in itself can have such a huge impact on everything, really, can't it? And I think
Yes.
that's one of the main things I took away from it. So when so going on a little bit now, just to sort of lab test, just going over them briefly, really. But you said 20% of healthy thyroid activity depends on a healthy gut.
Yes. Yeah. Because we need that bacteria. The healthy gut bacteria helps with the thyroid conversion. Some of it is also done in the liver, but that is why we need a healthy gut. We need to have the proper amounts of nutrients to allow for the thyroid to function, which is,
Yeah,
it's crazy,
yeah,
right? Yeah, they're on different sides of the body, but
I know,
it truly is part of
I
the
know,
picture.
I know. It's just, oh, it's incredible. So in terms of, we've talked a little bit about like, did we mention adrenal stress before? I feel like we sort of mentioned the adrenal sort of system, but adrenal stress is quite a huge one, a huge topic. I'm actually covering adrenal fatigue. Um, so just touching on like how much cortisol has to do with all of this and stress. And I know you're talking a little bit. Can you tell us a little bit about sort of all of this in a nutshell, if you like?
Yes. So the adrenals, again, there is a relationship with the thyroid based on the pituitary gland because the anterior pituitary also affects the adrenals. But even more significantly, really, is that high cortisol or too much chronic stress is going to weaken almost every system in the body. It decreases thyroid conversion, it decreases
Yeah,
detoxification, it affects how your cells are going to take up thyroid hormone. I mean, every one of those 6 patterns, at some point in one of those patterns, excess cortisol is part of the picture.
yeah,
And so it is a main root cause to address as we are addressing the thyroid. And if we don't, we're really not going to fully have resolution to the
yeah.
thyroid.
What would you suggest to someone at home then? Excuse me, that maybe is very stressed or got a lot of work stress or even just stress on the body?
Yeah.
You know, what would you suggest to them? What do they need to do? Maybe key
My
tips.
my top recommendation for stress, particularly that we can't necessarily get out of, you know, it's like we
Yeah,
have to go to the meetings, we have to deal with our
yeah,
kids, we have
yeah,
to go to work, whatever it might be, is
yeah,
to find something daily, weekly, and monthly to intentionally reduce stress. So daily might be a daily walk after dinner.
yeah,
Weekly might be, a weekly chat with your girlfriend. Monthly might be a monthly dip in the ocean or a monthly massage or, a monthly day trip for yourself, whatever it is for you that you can implement regularly to help reduce the cortisol on the system, we're going to start to find an improvement in adrenal health and on down the line for the rest of the body. So, it's not necessarily a matter of getting rid of the stress, it's how
Yeah.
we deal with it. And then
Yeah.
we can sleep better and our adrenals are going to work better all together.
Yeah. Sleep's a big one as well, isn't it? Sleep and
It
stress,
is. And it's like, but
diet
if
and
you're
gut.
stressed, how do you sleep?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, sure, you could take a sleeping medication,
Yeah.
but it's not going to be quality sleep. So again, the root cause is that cortisol. So if we can reduce that, we're going to find better sleep and then
Yeah.
we have better energy for the next
Yeah.
day and on down the line.
Yeah. And I read something interesting today from someone over here. He's a big guy on the sort of all levels of media over here. I won't mention his name actually, but he mentioned that he goes to sleep if he feels hungry in the evening to make sure that he doesn't eat any sugar, because obviously you're tired, you want to have a little snack before bed or something. He goes to sleep instead because that's his way of saying, I'll ignore the food. Maybe it's just I'm tired. So if he
Ah,
feels hungry, like now over here, it's called a night, for instance, in the evening. It's like, oh, I'll have a little something before bed. Don't just go to bed. Just go
yeah,
to bed and rest, and
yeah. Great
ignore
point.
the food.
Yeah.
And any other key tips you'd say to anyone? Because obviously, looking after their gut health might be a big one. We're covering that topic. I think we might have already covered it before the thyroid one goes out. But sort of any sort of looking after their gut and looking at their gut health is probably a big one as well, isn't it?
It is.
So anyone that's waiting for maybe tests, because over in the UK, sometimes we do wait a little period of time. That's just the nature, unfortunately, at the moment of healthcare. So we might be waiting a little bit longer. So if there's someone waiting at home that potentially feels like they've got some issues somewhere in the body, maybe potentially a thyroid issue as well, but as a result of an imbalance somewhere else or something, hasn't quite got to the root cause. Would you say sort of sleep, look at their gut health, look at their stress levels and where everything's sort of having an impact, and trying to, would they be the quick key things you suggest to someone to try and just manage first of all while they're waiting, perhaps?
That is exactly the recommendation that I would
Yeah.
have is, manage stress, manage
Mm.
sleep, have a healthy diet that increases healthy probiotics in the gut. So naturally occurring fermented
Yeah.
food. We're not going to know yet what exactly supplementation or medication or sometimes even dietary changes we might need until we get those results back. So at the very minimum, how
Yeah.
can we find some homeostasis within our lifestyle before adding those things in?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Brilliant. Well, thank you so much. But just I ask everyone this: 3 key points to take away from this podcast. What would you say? Putting you on the spot
Stress.
now.
Yeah. So number one, stress is a root cause of almost all chronic disease. Number two, you can have thyroid symptoms with normal thyroid hormone labs. And number three is be sure that you are consuming nutrition that is well-rounded, that supports gut health
Mm-hmm.
and gives you the nutrients to make what you need for your thyroid to function properly, with all the vitamins and minerals and amino acids that come from
Yeah.
proteins to allow for these processes to occur as well as possible without any other implementation.
Amazing. It's
Yeah.
been amazing to talk to you. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having
Great
me.
to
It was
have
so
you on. You're
fun.
welcome. Good to see you.
You too.